everyone, this is Olga Yershevsky. We're here at NexChange Interview Series, and look who I have with me today. I'm so excited that I have you, Alicia. Here we have Alicia Garcia-Herrero. She's Chief Economist at Natixis and a true star of a recent Block 020 meeting. Hello, Alicia. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
It's good to have you. How's it going? How are you today?
All fine, thank you.
So I wanted just to follow up on your recent speech, which was dedicated to central bank digital currencies. But first of all, I can't help, since you are an economist, true superstar, I can't help but ask about the whole economic situation that has been going on for some time now. The trade war, the US trade policy, the new economic policy that they are implementing over the past several months. So what is your opinion about that? What has been going on, and what we're looking into, like what's going to happen in the nearest future?
The trade war is, first of all, not a true war yet, which is great, and it's not only a trade war, so it's a full-fledged strategic competition between the two major hegemons in the world, which is the US and China. And interestingly, new alliances, which is part of this strategic competition, are being created around these two hegemons. Or put it this way, the old alliances that existed, and one is the most obvious being the transatlantic alliance, based military on NATO, but of course economically in terms of at least attempts to create a free trade agreement, which is called a TTIP, and which never went through. And this is the whole idea that those alliances are being kind of falling apart, or being, much less strong than they used to be, because the world is now confronting this strategic competition and is worrying about taking the wrong side or having to take sides. So new alliances, of course, Russia and China are being created, and even those are like tentative because nobody knows exactly whether they're ready to take one side. So it's a very interesting, it's like literally shifting sands type of international environment, which started with a trade war, which wasn't really a war, which wasn't really a trade-only war or conflict. And I think that's the whole idea. So this situation is here to stay. The two hegemons will continue to find areas of disagreement well beyond trade. We are already at the level, and this is very scary for the world, of financial de-linkage. And because of that, a lot of the things that we thought were being created to further globalize the world now might be created to protect one of the two hegemons from each other. Yeah, and that's kind of the interesting part about the trade war. So in other words, think about, and I'm getting closer to our key discussion point, which is central bank digital currencies. So, if before we were in a world where maybe there was no problem in using the existing reserve currency, the dollar, today we're more in a world where this might be an issue if you are the hegemon, which doesn't have to have an international currency yet. And that massively changes the rationale of things for both and for the rest of the world. Yeah. So if you are a central bank, think about a US ally. Think about Israel. Just to keep, might not be the most kind of politically correct thing to say for me, taking Israel, but never mind, just an ally of the US.
Okay.
And maybe they have most of the reserves in dollars, and maybe they feel, I can't be as exposed. I want to hedge a little bit. I want to hedge part of my wealth and income and business with a new hegemon, just in case. You see, so everybody's trying to find kind of the right balance. And this of course is essential for currencies, because currencies, international currencies, reserve currencies, have huge externalities, and network externalities. So you tend to get into the extreme, meaning you could operate with one single or one major reserve currency. And this has been the case of the dollar for a long time. It's true that because of monetary union, European Monetary Union, we had kind of a much stronger second currency that we would have had otherwise, because, you know, we added up in a way the strength of the D-mark and other European, continental European currencies. But other than that, I mean, other than the euro, the rest of the reserve currencies are minimal. The role is very, very small. Even the British pound, the Swiss franc, or the Japanese yen, again, with the exception of the euro, and this is simply because we're pulling together quite a few economies within that monetary union. So in a world where there is no strategic competition, you can do that. You can go to the extreme because the network externalities push you there, because efficiency gains are superior to whatever risk you may be running by being only one-sided. Because the risk is so slow, it's so small, because there's no other side, in other words. But in today's world, when we already see another prominent economic side, which contends, you know, which pushes for to keep power, the idea of having a single reserve currency or depending excessively on that single reserve currency becomes more difficult, especially for the other hegemon, or whoever is surrounding or hovering around that hegemon in that alliance. This is why I started with the alliance, because it's not only about China, but anybody who is surrounding China that may fear being too dependent on the one and only, if I may say, and again, excluding the euro, of course, reserve currency. So I think this strategic competition, which is the essence of the trade war, and that's why I'm not talking about even tariffs, because I think that defeats the purpose. I mean, that's just the surface of what's really happening.
These are just consequences.
This strategic competition creates the need for more reserve currencies, and a central bank digital currency could, we're not certain because this is a new, it's an experiment, but it could accelerate perhaps that process. And that's why it's becoming increasingly interesting. I'm not saying this is the case of all central banks in the world. We could argue that this is not the case of Norway, let alone probably Uruguay, you know, to create an e-peso. That's not the story there. That might be, you know, to be up to date with technological progress. In the case of Uruguay, kind of a, you know, of a window shop for Uruguay having this e-peso, or for Norway, the fact that, you know, currency is disappearing literally. But I think for the PBoC is a totally different matter. It's more about why not test something that could perhaps, if needed, leapfrog me pursuing that road of an international currency.
So
what's the cost of trying that?
This can't be a one-side street anymore, right? And well, there is an opinion, a strong opinion, that China actually created all that buzz around central bank digital currency just because, just to, you know, to let the U.S. know that the government is capable of creating currency that actually compete with the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
So
but there is a big. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so that might be the initial purpose.
Yes,
right?
yes. That was exactly my point. I think the way China started exploring with the central bank digital currency, both the degree of you know, back and forth and secretive type, you know, to me, and this is just my personal opinion, looks like you want to create, is like theater. You want to create the atmosphere for something to look bigger. I mean, to you want to create the atmosphere to let the world know that this could be important for the world. And you go back and forth and so even, you know, the details, if you look at how many details other central banks are giving about their own processes compared to the PBoC. Yeah, why? You may say, well, that's the general practice. Not really, not really. You have plans on TLAC for the banks. I mean, I think this is especially secretive. Why? Because of the massive power entailed in creating, and this is the step that I want to clarify. They're not creating a reserve currency, because yet they are creating the embryo of a digital reserve currency. Because for them to be able to create they can create a digital currency, but that doesn't mean they can impose their digital currency on the rest of the world, because the rest of the world needs to accept it.
Right.
So there's a principle, and this is no matter whether a currency is digital or not. There's a very important principle in the theory of international currencies since McKinnon, and which is what I was trying to explain in that seminar, that I may not have gone really in depth, and it's very important. You can only go all the way in your internationalization of your currency, not payments. Yes, so PBoC digital currency can, of course, push renminbi payments overseas if accepted by the host country, as I explained then, pretty quickly, if accepted. But there is one additional issue to realize, that the denomination of investment products, meaning the ability of China to denominate investment products in renminbi, so for investment purposes or funding purposes for Chinese companies abroad, that thing needs something, as a macroeconomist, which is very, very important, is that you actually need to borrow. And I wrote about this a long time ago. It's called the renminbization of China's debt, meaning China's debt overseas today is in dollar. It's very small. It's about 10% of GDP. Very, very small compared to nearly 300% of GDP in debt. Yeah. Now that debt is, except for the dim sum bonds issued in Hong Kong, which is tiny, 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 increasingly so, is in dollar, mainly in dollar, tiny euro. Now, for you to have renminbi denominated products that you need to fund yourself, that others buy in the rest of the world, you need to have more funding needs. I mean, you need to borrow more. You need to be in a position where basically your savings are much lower than your investment needs, which is not yet the case of China, which wasn't the case of Japan, which also explains why the Japanese yen didn't go very far, even when Japan's economy was literally in mid-80s, at least a year, I believe, bigger than the US. So meaning, why was Japan, even Japan with, yes, slightly closed capital account, but nothing compared with China, so relatively open for the time, yeah, for the 80s. Why didn't the yen become an international currency? No matter e-currency, hard currency, why?
Right.
Because Japan did not need to borrow. So
Mm-hmm.
China, in other words, and I know that we've moved forward to the actual question of the PBoC digital currency, but these two things here. For payments, China needs recipient countries, meaning those receiving the Chinese tourists with their currency, or those importing from China, they need to accept this e-currency. And that could be based on regulations. It's basically the same as, having a country, not Ecuador, because that's fully dollarized, so the dollar is the legal tender, but countries with a lot of dollarization. Bolivia, so they need to accept payments in dollars. Here they would need to accept payments in renminbi, in the PBoC digital currency, whatever name they want to choose. And that's one for payments. But for investment, we need more products denominated in renminbi, whether digital or not. And that second thing is very difficult nowadays for China. So it could well be that this PBoC digital currency becomes pervasive, or at least more of an international currency in terms of the share of settlements pretty quickly if the countries accept to be paid in that currency. But the investment part, that's going to take time because we don't have the underlying assets. And I don't think the e-currency can push that because it's a macroeconomic issue. You need the products. It's not about whether it's digital or not. You need Chinese savings to go down for China to fund itself from the rest of the world, with the difference that it would not be in dollar, but it would be in renminbi. Whether digital or not is a second question. But I'm saying before you even get digital, you need this very important this this a priori, this you need this for China to have a reserve currency, and the digitalization of that currency might not push this further or faster, only for the payments. The payments, indeed, I think that's where, you know, their attitude, more secretive, kind of explains, because I think it's easier to impose if you're the first one out of the very large central banks in the world. That, you know, if the dollar does that first, maybe it's going to be harder. If the PBoC starts first and kind of agrees with other key countries where renminbi in circulation could be large because of the tourists or the business, then they have, you know, probably a better, more of a likelihood that it can become more international faster for payments. So yeah, so sorry I took too long, but I just wanted to clarify these points.